My name is Lilianne Mujica-Parodi. I'm an associate professor at Stony Brook University in the Department of Biomedical Engineering, and I'm also director of the Laboratory for Computational Neurodiagnostics. I'm interested in developing an area that I call neurodiagnostics. So traditionally, clinical neuroscience has focused on the question of biomarkers. That is, can we identify properties of the brain that would then be used potentially diagnostically to say someone's in this category versus that category. Right now I'm working on a very exciting project for the Brain Initiative on brain aging. I think it's really unusual, and it's very specifically appropriate to the Brain Initiative mechanism because it's operating at many different levels. So on the one hand, there's a public health component. It's addressing a real-world, very timely problem, which is the impact of insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes on brain aging, the development of dementia. It's asking, again, very practical questions about the impact of diet. Are there scientifically justified reasons to eat one thing versus another? And instead of looking over many populations and asking questions that don't have a way to dissociate causality, that is, it's not possible to identify the specific role of the diet in the outcome, we're able to probe much deeper and to be able to ask what is the role of this nutrient in feeding the neuron versus this nutrient. From a scientific perspective, it's also asking a very, very deep fundamental question about how neurons utilize fuel and how they essentially make decisions in reorganizing when those resources are limited. And so on the one hand, there's a really real-world practical application that I think can have an impact even in the short term, but on the other hand, it's a very deep fundamental question about how the brain works that I think kind of appeals at a totally different level for me as a scientist. The project that I'm working on is actually asking a very deep fundamental question about neuroscience, which is that when the brain forms networks, so as a clinical neuroscientist, we're used to thinking about networks and visualizing networks with neuroimaging. But we don't really understand what drives the formation of those networks. So we tend to think that those networks are produced as a way to achieve certain functions in the brain. Let's say, thinking about math, you activate your math network, and if you're navigating a maze, you activate your spatial navigation network. But in fact, there are two optimization problems. That in fact, you have to not only achieve the function that you want to achieve, if you're a brain network, but you also need to do so in the face of limited resources. I live in New York, and I had to come to this conference, which was in Maryland, and there are many different routes I could have taken, right? And so I had to choose which route to take. And if I'm in a hurry, I might take a flight, even though it's more expensive. And if I'm more leisurely but don't have as much money, I might, drive. And whether I take a route with a toll versus one that is more scenic, these are all decisions that are made in the face of competing constraints. And so what I'm asking about neurons is, are they operating in the same way? Are they making essentially decisions in the face of competing constraints? And how do those decisions change when the amount of resources that they have available changes?